Hi, everybody. You are listening to Judging Meghan with your host, Meghan Judge. I was about to put my glasses on, but now I'm not because I thought something was wrong, but it's not. That was a great intro. Here's what I'm going to say. Today, I'm truly looking forward to this interview. I've been looking forward to this interview for a couple months. I think we scheduled this a couple of months ago. And today is kind of a tough day for me, and I'm going to tell you why. For my listeners, they know I lost my best friend very tragically almost 21 years ago to the day, or 22 this year. Sorry, 22 years ago to the day. And it was a rough morning. I had to get my teenage daughter, like her charger. She never packs everything she's supposed to pack for school. And then I kind of like ran into somebody that I don't like, I'll be real. And it just like triggered all this really hard, upsetting energy in me. And then I kind of took a step back. I was in my car and I was telling one of my closest friends the story of how I lost Julie. She actually didn't know how Julie had passed away. And she knew she passed away, but not how. And it's a very upsetting and hard story to hear. And then all of a sudden, I just started thinking about it. And I was like, there's a reason why I'm talking about this right now and getting upset. And I know she's listening. And then I love to talk to her in my car. It's a very strange thing because I know all my neighbors were probably watching me and like, what is this woman doing? So I hung up the phone and I just like burst out crying and I started talking to her and I was like, I know you're here and you're with me and I love you and I miss you. And so today's episode will be a tough one to get through. And I was telling Betsy before we recorded, the whole reason why I do this podcast is not to be a millionaire because it's never going to happen for me. But why I do it is to truly tell people it's okay to talk about loss and to talk about grief and to talk about suicide prevention and suicide awareness. I'm very honest and upfront with my own story of being suicidal in 2020. And so till the day I stop this podcast, my biggest part of my platform is suicide prevention. We've all been put here for a reason and we all deserve acceptance.
Judging Meghan with Meghan Judge.
I'm a trauma survivor from a really young age, and I have been diagnosed with complex PTSD in the past few years. I've been surrounded by death and abuse much of my life. I've been dragged through the mud and have been to the point of not wanting to go on anymore. Through my interviews with other survivors, I've learned that there is a way out. From recovering to surviving and thriving, we all have the strength to come out the other side.
You are listening to Judging Meghan.
So I am deeply honored to have Betsy Thibaut Stephenson. I said it right, Betsy.
You did.
I started in my head. My wheels went football player, because I always butcher an intro. Like anyone that listens knows I can never do a good intro, but here we are. I did it. Betsy is a mother. She's also a Labrador lover like I am. And she wrote the most beautiful book called, I'm going to hold it up right now if you're watching on YouTube. It's called Blackbird, A Mother's Reflections on Grief, Loss, and Life After Suicide. And I have a page like turned right there, but Betsy's the most beautiful writer. And I really highly recommend. It comes out on April 8th. You can get this book, Barnes & Noble. It's available everywhere. And just a beautiful story, touching and beautifully written. Betsy, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. It's nice to be here, Meghan.
I have to say, because I like to start light, that I love it reminds me of home. Because before we started recording, she said I know you're from Virginia and I'm from Maryland. Mm-hmm. And I always recognize that East Coast accent because I grew up with it.
Well, and I've been here almost 40 years, and I'm originally from Louisiana, and so that slips in sometimes too.
Okay.
But I'm DMV, Mid-Atlantic. It's where I've raised my family.
Yeah, it's a beautiful area. I miss it. And right now, all the cherry blossoms are out. Have you gone?
So, unfortunately, I was not able to go for pleasure, but my office is not too far from the tidal basin, and I have to go through that in order to get to my office.
Yeah, we're going to touch on this at the end. But sadly, I mean, something so beautiful, and then we're like seeing what's happening right now, unraveling, which is kind of scary. Okay, so I always start the podcast with, where are you from? Tell me where you're from. You just said Louisiana, but just tell me a little bit about you and like your family and your life, before the horrific hardships that you had to go through in 2022, which is still so recent.
Yes. Born and raised in Louisiana. My mother actually moved to Colorado when I was real young. So I spent a good part of each year with my mother in Colorado. So that gave me a pretty different, two different worlds, the Deep South and the Rocky Mountains. And then I moved to the Washington, D.C. area right after college graduation. And I thought I'd be here 2 or 3 years doing the Washington thing. And it's been decades. And I've raised a family here. I live in the suburbs of Washington, but my job is downtown, and I'm always oriented toward that. And I've got 3 children, 2 daughters and a son, and my son, Charlie, is the inspiration for the book. He died by suicide in 2022.
So I love that you still say I have 3 children, because it's so important to always say I have 3. So I lost my sister as a little girl. Like I was 2, and my mom still says I have 5 children because they're still here. I always say they're just in the next room.
They're here, and, they're real. And I do have 3 children. I mean, I carry Charlie with me just as I did when he was alive. And I talk to him, and I blame things on him, when the Wi-Fi goes out, I say, Charlie, why are you messing with my Wi-Fi? And when the traffic gets rough, I say, come on, Charlie, can't you do something about this? It's very important to make him a part of the everyday bits of our lives. We talk about him openly, in every way, jokingly, regretfully, we'll be sad. We have an expression in our family, it was a hard day. It was a hard Charlie day. Sometimes you just feel the grief. But we love to tell stories about him, and we love it when people tell us stories. And I think that helps us a lot.
I think there was a bit that I read in the book, and if you're comfortable, we're going to kind of go into the story.
Sure.
I've done multiple episodes with mothers that have lost children to suicide, and it's not like any other loss, I think. And so something you wrote in the book that really touched me was about how you had to like have your first Christmas, right? And people don't, I say this a lot, like when people are going through a loss, particularly that kind of loss, they don't know the right thing to say. And so they would say, in the book you talk about, they said something like, we're so sorry, Christmas must have been hard, or something like that. And you were just like nodded or said, yeah. But in your head, you said something like, it was so horrible. Do you want to kind of talk about that?
Yeah. I mean, I've never, from day one, I have not shied away from the realness of what we were experiencing and the emotions. I don't like making people uncomfortable, so sometimes I will give them a little warning, but I'll say, I lost my son. I cry a lot. These things are hard for me. And because that helps me, it just sort of takes a layer of pressure off. But, even when you're open, you don't want to like hit people over the head with it, right?
Yeah.
So, especially when they're being gentle and supportive, I know that was hard. That's a beautiful thing to say to someone who's grieving. I know that this holiday, this birthday must have been hard. That acknowledgement is so powerful and it's so affirming, and it is just a little bit of oxygen to keep you going. But in my head, I'm like, oh yeah, you have no idea. I mean, it is losing a child to suicide is 1,000 times worse than I ever could have imagined any kind of loss. I spent a whole book trying to describe it, and I don't know how to describe it. It cuts at every aspect of who you are as an individual, who you were, who you think you're going to be, the kind of parent you are, the kind of, citizen on the planet you are. It's devastating. Plus just the simple fact that you miss them.
Yeah. And being a mother, myself, just they say all the time, like there's no loss like the loss of a child. And then on top of that, you have to deal with that additional layer and all the things that go with it. So I would love to ask you about Charlie kind of before we go into that story, because I want to hear about Charlie. I know he's sitting here with us.
He is. He's actually right there. Charlie is my youngest child. I had 3 kids in 3 years. He was always quiet, but not because he was shy. He just kind of let other people have the floor, even when he was a little kid. Impish sense of humor, just a little clever and, wanted to see what he could get away with and surprise you, but gentle and very tender person. He loved sports, playing them, watching them. He had tons of friends in high school and college and in our community. His sisters adored him. The sisters would kind of do the sisterly thing, but Charlie was always the favorite, And, I think his personality was to never want to inconvenience anyone, never wanted to be a problem. And that made him very generous. He loved helping people. He was the guy that people called when they needed something. He would sit down and have that long heart to heart with people. He was even just a good all around guy. He was the guy that at fraternity parties, we heard a story that there was a formal and all the girls are all dressed up and they have their outfits and they all had purses, but they didn't want to carry their purses around. So they gave them to Charlie and he hung them on his arms and he acted like a little scarecrow for them so they could go off and dance. And he was like the purse guy, but he was also the guy that looked after people. We learned after he died that all these little things, like this young woman wrote us a letter and said, yeah, I went to a party off campus and I didn't know a lot of people there and I was trying to find my friends and I knew Charlie and he was walking out the door, but he said, I'll stay with you until you find your friends. And so he walked me around to make sure that I found who I was looking for. He was that kind of guy. But I think, unfortunately, when you're so focused on others and not making a big thing about yourself, you can lose yourself. And when you struggle, which he did, it's hard to put the energy into yourself that maybe you deserve. And I think, we knew he was struggling with depression, but we also knew he was withholding a lot from us. And I think it's because he didn't want to bother us. He thought he had it. He wanted to take care of it on his own, but it was too big.
Do you mind me asking, when did the struggles with depression start? And it sounds like also he was an empath. Like he definitely, a lot of times empaths struggle and have hard times. Yeah. And I hear that.
And he was 21 when he died. So, one of the things that's really one of the cruel after effects is, you see the person he was, but he was also growing into himself. And, he'll never have a chance to find the way to be that empath, but not give too much of himself away. That comes with maturity, that comes with experience, that comes with, even, hard things happening and learning to set boundaries. But what happened was his junior year of college, he was in Texas. We got a call in the spring, actually right about 3 years ago, right now, from a friend of his who said Charlie has mentioned that he might want to harm himself. And we couldn't believe it. We were like, what? He's Mr. Easygoing, he's Mr. Carefree. But I didn't hesitate, jumped right on a plane, flew to Texas overnight, was there, as the sun came up, met him in a hotel across the street from where he lived. And we went to my room, and he fell asleep on the bed, and I fell asleep on the sofa, and he slept for hours. And when he woke up, I crawled into bed behind him and, kind of hugged him. Moms don't get to hug their 21-year-old sons when they're curled up after a nap very often. And I just wrapped my arms around him, and he sobbed. He sobbed. And I said, what's going through your head right now? What are you feeling? And he said, fear. And I said, what are you afraid of? He said, just fear. And he didn't tell me, but we had a series of conversations starting then. And I did ask him that afternoon. I said, are you thinking of killing yourself? Are you thinking of hurting yourself? And he said, no. He said no. But he was so overwhelmed, he couldn't eat. He could not. He was lethargic. So I stayed, and we talked, and he went to class, and then he would come back to the hotel, and then he would go to his house and get books and clean clothes, and he would come back to the hotel. So he was kind of living a normal life with me hidden away. I stayed for a week. And while I was there, he received a call from the mental health center at his college, because he didn't tell me this, but I learned it when the phone rang. He had called the crisis line. He had called, a lot of institutions, colleges, universities have, if you need help, if you're in crisis, call. Mm-hmm. And he called it. And he had spoken with them. And I guess they did a little triage, and they said, we think you're not at risk right now, but we're going to follow up. So that's what I was hearing, was the follow up. And while he was having the conversation with the crisis line in a non-crisis moment, I heard him explain that he had been struggling for a year, that he was feeling very unmotivated, that he put himself in therapy on campus. He used the college counseling services. He never told us. He never told anybody. He just did it. He knew he was sick and he was trying to get better. And so I'm learning all this while I'm there. And he committed to continuing therapy. He made arrangements with his professors. It was the end of the semester. They were great. They have systems in place to say, look, this is what's going on. I'm having this health issue. And so like he had extra time to turn some assignments in and, things like that. And I told him, I said, if you can't do this, if you can't finish this semester, it's fine. We will figure it out. Don't worry. He's like, no, I've just got 3 weeks to go. I'll be all right. And sure enough, he did. He got straight A's. And I left after about a week and I made him promise. I said, I know where your head is. You gotta reach out if you need help. You've done it before, right? So let's reach out to me or a friend or, the crisis line, anything.
Wait, Betsy, I have a question. Was he on any kind of medication?
No.
Okay.
We talked about that because I've been on medication.
So have I.
And my daughters have, and it's worked really well for us. But in my mind, and I guess in reality, this was still kind of new for him, It made sense that he was going to go through therapy for a few weeks or a few months and kind of see if he could peel away some of the tension and the uncertainty. I'm a huge fan of medication, but there's no reason to jump right into it.
I agree.
And, during that time, so I went home and he carried on and we saw him several times. He flew home a couple of times. We met in Louisiana for his sister's graduation from college. We saw him every couple of weeks. But the time between that cry, that initial moment when we learned that he was struggling and when he killed himself was 11 weeks. And that whole time he's seeing a doctor. We're not all over him, but, I said, you got to know, I'm going to have to ask you how you're doing. And I'm not going to make a big thing. We don't have to go into detail. I'm not going to lecture you, but I need to just check on you from time to time. He's like, it's fine. Check on me. And I said, okay, great. And so whatever, once a week, we would text all the time and his sisters would text him and call him and his dad would call him and everything. Say, okay, tell me, how's your mood? How's your outlook? Doing good. You like your therapist? Yep. Everything's good.
Were you at this point up at night? I mean, you're a mom. I'm a mom. I know how this, were you up every night worried about him? Were you cause it can take over your head, right?
At first, the first couple of weeks.
Yeah.
For sure. Because you just have to, a lot of it was me wrapping my head around, wait a minute, this is my steady kid.
Yeah. Yeah.
His sisters had depression, had anxiety. I mean, they're all over the place. Therapy, medication, mood, front and center. But not this guy. He was just, Mr. Easy, Mr. Chill, Mr. Calm. And I started to feel a little better after, a couple of weeks had gone by and he was getting help, There were times when we saw him where he would be kind of fine. And then he had a little setback, plans fell through. And he would just kind of go to his room and stay for hours. And, you're working real hard to not overdo it, right? To not overreact to every little thing. 21-year-olds spend a lot of time in their rooms. They spend a lot of time sleeping when they're not out partying or hanging out. Mm-hmm. So, looking back, there were some things that were like, that was a little uncomfortable. You probably wasn't doing that great. But at the time, it didn't seem extreme. And in fact, the last time we saw him alive was 3 weeks before he died. He spent about 5 days here, and he had a series of things going on at his high school that he graduated from. He had a lot of friends in town. They were doing fun things. We hung out here at the house. It was my birthday, just like he was living normal, and he looked a little thin and a little tired, but he was doing great. And we took him to the airport so he could fly back to Texas, where he was living for the summer. And, we gave him a big hug goodbye. And I have a picture of him hugging his father. And we got in the car, and we're like waving, bye, honey. He just walks in, goes to get on the airplane. We pull away from the terminal, and my husband looks at me and he said, he's going to be all right. He was dead 3 weeks later.
That's a hard thing to hear, because I feel like you did everything right. And, but there was nothing you could do. It sounds like he had made up his mind, and that must be, as a mother, the hardest part that you had to deal with, right? Or tell me, what was the hardest part?
I think it's more complicated than that.
Okay.
He had not made up his mind.
Oh, okay.
He had ongoing conversations with his sisters. We have a text between him and one of his sisters. She said, you know what? I have rough days, but I can tell you, I feel like everything's going to be okay. Everything's going to be okay. No matter what, everything's going to be okay. And, we've kind of done a little reconstructing of, the ins and outs of the days and the weeks and things. And we know he had hard days after he said that, obviously. But, he wrote a couple of letters that he left behind. They weren't suicide notes. They were more like they were kind of like, do you ever like letters that you never intend to send type of thing, where you're just sort of pouring your heart out and just kind of sharing things. It's a little bit of a journal situation. He had a few that he left behind. And of course, we've devoured them. And there's a lot of just really everyday stuff, I went for a run today and it felt great. And, I'm ready to travel again. I've got a trip planned for the end of the summer, and travel is great because, But he would talk about in these letters his kind of doubts and hard times. And he got very passionate in part of one letter where he said, I will fight these demons. I will not let them win. He knew. I had talked to him. I'd said, these feelings, they're lying to you. You can't believe them. They're big, they're real. I'm not saying they're not real, but they're lies. It's like you've got something in your head that is lying to you. So just remember that. Like, try so hard. So it's temporary. It's going to go away. And the night before he died, he went out with a bunch of friends. They were all in town for the summer, doing summer job things in their college town. Several people lived in one block in Fort Worth, right off their campus. And they all went out to bars, and then they went and they were hanging back out at his house afterwards, and it was like 3:00 in the morning. I mean, one of those nights. And by all accounts, he was not overly drunk, or we knew he'd been drinking, but there was nothing unusual about that side of things. And they're hanging out and they're playing cards, and he gets in this long conversation with this girl that he'd actually gone to high school with. And she was having a hard time because she had some girl drama, and she was really anxious and upset. And he said, don't worry, what you're feeling right now, it's not going to last. If you're feeling really upset and uncertain, it's going to pass. These things don't last. And he said, we've been friends a long time, and I just want you to know you can always come to me. You live right across the street. You can always come to me if you need anything. Hours later, he was dead. So it shows you how you can be, if you're sick with depression,
Mm-hmm.
you can be aware of it. You can be trying real hard to stay healthy, stay on solid ground. You can recognize it as a thing that's separate from you. But if it gets you at the wrong time, if it's too loud, if it's too powerful, if there's nothing around to catch you or snap you or distract you, like a Sunday morning in Fort Worth, Texas, when it's 110 degrees outside, depression can win.
I mean, I can relate to the piece of it myself, and I'm very honest with my own struggles of these. You brought up, like, it's like voices almost, like these feelings that you just can't get away from. They chase you, and they chase me at night when I was at my worst. And for me, like, I needed medication because I couldn't get away from the voices. And I think, like, when somebody takes their own life, it's people are so judgmental against it. It's like when you're in the struggling points where people say, oh, you're going to be fine. Just do this or just do that. Right. It's like, but you don't understand it unless you're actually experiencing it and in it.
Well, and it's not what I've found, because I had a time when I was suicidal. I write about it in the book.
Yeah.
It's like it came upon me. It wasn't like I'm going through and I'm overwhelmed or I'm depressed and, oh, I have an idea. I think I want to kill myself. It's like, it is not a transaction. It is not a just decision. Oh, I have a solution to this problem. It is this feeling inside of you, and there lies, that everything points toward you're never going to be happy. You're never going to feel better. I mean, think about, you hear people convince themselves that people are better off without them. Well, that's bullshit. There's not one person in the world that the world is better off without. And then when I look at my son, who was literally surrounded by friends, who had people all around him who loved him, and he loved us, and he never wanted to hurt us or bother us, right? He didn't want to inconvenience us. For him to take his own life and basically devastate so many people, that's how I know it was the illness that killed Charlie. Because a healthy Charlie would never hurt that many people. There were 850 people at his funeral and over 1,000 logged in. It was shocking and devastating. He is missed. I get texts from his friends almost every day. And this loss is felt. It's been felt in our community. He wouldn't want all this attention. He certainly wouldn't want his mom going on national podcasts and talking about everything. But I kind of feel like that's the mom tax, It's like, all right, kid, if this is the way you're going to go, then,
this is your
I need
payback.
to find ways to heal myself.
Yeah.
And to try and make sure no one is sitting where we are, or fewer people are sitting where we are. So I'm going to talk about it.
You have to talk about it. This is why I do talk about my story. This is part of it. Okay, so let me ask you this. So the hardest part was obviously when you had to find out and how you had to find out, and tell me, I can't even imagine how hard that was. And, it was just the very beginning, because your book is also about like the loss of losing a parent to dementia, correct? And this was all
my mother-in-law, yes.
Yeah, this was all at one time. So you were dealing with all these different things at one period of time. What was that like? I know I've interviewed people before that have lost children to suicide, and it's like an out of body experience, like where you're like, how do you even go on? What do you do? I ask that all the time to people that are grieving all different kinds of loss of loved ones. How do you go on? What do you do? How do you pick yourself up? What do you tell other people? What do you tell listeners of mine that like could be dealing with a child that's, they're worried is suicidal? Do you say like, did you have all kinds of thoughts like, this is what I did wrong? Because it sounds to me like you did everything right.
Well, couple of things. On the big thoughts about what else could I have done. Of course, I think about that. We all do. Anybody who knew him does, right? Suicide's kind of interesting that way. If someone that we loved had died of cancer, we would not all be sitting here saying, oh, I should have done this, right? Because we would have trusted that they were in the care of the medical professionals that were going to do everything they could to save that person. But suicide, because I think it is so mysterious, and also it's an emotional brain thing. We are all, we can put ourselves in this position where it's like we could have been the savior. And you know what? In a way, we all could have been, right? I mean, anybody could have made the call or knocked on the door or sent the text or the, whatever it is. But you realize very quickly that if you spend your days focused on what you could have done or should have done, then you are not living. And I'm not saying living your best life and skipping down the beach living. I mean, you will die yourself. So you have to make peace with questions that have no answers. And you have to turn some of that over, turn those questions over. I turned it over to the disease. Why did depression do this to my son? I've been depressed before. I felt suicidal before. I'm here. Mm-hmm. It is not an uncommon affliction, right? I'm putting it all on the disease. And yeah, I ask myself, and there are times I get very upset and very angry with myself, but this disease killed him. So I can't stay in a place where I'm constantly ruminating about questions and regrets, because then I'm not alive. And that is harder than it sounds, but it's also liberating. Like if you can truly do it. It doesn't mean don't have questions. It means accept they don't have answers.
Also, I wonder too, you know, I say this a lot about certain people, and I'm not saying like there was a reason why it happened. And everyone's like, I hate everything happens for a reason. I'm a person that like says that. I don't like the way it's said, if that makes sense. But I'm like, well, there's gotta be a reason why this happened. Why? Why did these things happen? It doesn't make any sense. But when he was saying to his girlfriend, like, I'm always here for you, it sounds like he fought until the very end. Like he was a real fighter and just like not of this world. Have you ever thought about that? Because I'm going to get upset. Sorry, we're both crying. Yeah. Sorry, listeners. This is like ugly cry time. So like I was saying in the beginning, I lost my best friend 22 years ago, like to the day. And she just wasn't of this world. She was not of this world. She was too good for this world. And so I think about her a lot, and I think like, why did that happen? Why did she have to be taken out so tragically the way that she was? And it's because I know she wasn't of this world. And it sounds to me like Charlie wasn't of this world either. And so like sometimes these horrible, horrible things happen. Sorry, listeners. And it's because people aren't of this world, and they're still with us. Like I say all the time, they're just in the next room. And, I think about like what's going on in the world right now. And I was thinking this today, and I was just thinking, I'm just so happy she's not here to see all this horrible stuff that's going on in our country. And I'm so sorry I'm crying so much. But it's an emotional day. And if you're listening, crying is just an emotion. It's part of us as human beings. We cry and we laugh and we joke, but I think crying is really important too. So I have to tell you that, because when you shared the story, up until the last moments or the last hours of his life, he spent his time trying to help someone else. To me, it just clearly means he's just not of this world, and he's still with you. You can't see him and you can still talk to him, but he had other work to do. And if you're spiritual like I am, he's still there doing it. We just can't see him.
Yeah. I mean, we unapologetically hold him up on a pedestal, and you know what? We're his family, so we can do that. And people who loved him can do that. And, he was fully human, but he was very good. And it's almost like he just was too easy in our life to stay, and we are all, the four of us that are left are obviously fundamentally different. And if you believe that we are here on this earth in this earthly form to learn and grow, there is nothing that'll push you to learn and grow more than extreme grief and the trauma around that grief. And in that sense, we are not just now operating, how would Charlie want us to be? How would Charlie want us to conduct ourselves? What kind of citizens or friends or husbands or wives or parents would he want us to be? But, it's also about continuing to be as alive as we can. And that's, I think, what happens a lot, particularly when parents lose children. a part of you is dead. I mean, there are moments it is so overwhelming. Even on good days, But I knew even in the early days of grief when I was just like vibrating jello, like I could not finish a thought. I couldn't talk. I couldn't eat. I mean, it is very, very hard. I knew I can't always be like this. I don't know how I'm going to be. I don't know what my life is going to be like. I don't know what my personality or if I'm going to have a sense of humor or if I'm going to be, hard driving. I don't know, but I can't stay like this. And so I made it my job to learn how to move through and grow and heal in that loss. And everyone who suffers any loss has their own journey, but I think it's absolutely essential to be conscious of the fact that you are growing and changing and learning. You can't bring the person back.
Yeah.
But you have to say, all right, so what am I left with? And what am I going to do with it? And again, it's not about going skydiving or, frolicking on the beach. It's about, taking where you are now and trying to push yourself in little bitty increments. I couldn't leave the house for 1.5 years. But every day I had little bitty things I did. And when I say little, I mean I returned a text. I put the dishes away. I took a phone call. I answered the door, right? But being aware of those things, being conscious of those things is where the growth is. It's not just doing them because you have no choice and you have to button up and you have to be, get on with it. But, saying, all right, this was, I couldn't go to the grocery store by myself 2 months ago, but I just did it. And being aware of it. So you're giving yourself some victories and you're practicing being in the world with your new self because you are a totally new person after any kind of trauma like this.
Well, it sounds like too, like just reading, like in the book, like you were determined to find ways, like whatever I need to do, I have to do this. Because was it also, you were married, like they say, like this kind of thing breaks up marriages, breaks up families, obviously. You still had 2 daughters. So you're like sitting here like, this is my purpose. Like I have to stay here. Tell me a little bit about that.
So it sounds pretty simplistic. It sounds like the thing of, bad movies, but my husband, within days of losing Charlie, sat down and said, we know what happens. This blows families apart. It blows marriages apart. And I just want you to know that I'm committed to making sure that doesn't happen. And I said, me too. We didn't know what we were saying. We didn't know what the path was. We're still on the path, right? But we were absolutely committed to grieving and growing together and not, being alone or against each other. And we were absolutely committed to doing whatever we could to help our daughters grow and heal. And we knew that also it would be more helpful to them if we were trying to be healthy about it as well. So our entire family, we all kind of like hands in said, all right, it's not what we want. And it's going to be really hard, but we're going to do what we can. And we each have therapists I have two. And
Bragger.
They're great.
Good.
But we each have done our own path. And I think the most important part of it boils down, again, it's a very simple complex concept. We are respectful of each other's grief, and whatever that looks like. So sometimes it looks like being busy. Sometimes it's just being alone and quiet. Sometimes it's talking about it all the time. Sometimes it's saying, I need to go, 12 hours without bringing this up, right?
Or anger, fighting.
Anger.
Yeah.
There have been baseball bats.
Okay.
Smashed against trees.
Okay.
And of course, I'm like, wait, which tree? Because I like those trees,
Yeah. Yeah.
But no, I mean, some of us have been very, very angry. I have not been angry. I'm peeved. But my overwhelming emotion is heartbreak that my son was struggling so much. I mean, just think about it as a mom. Like, think about, if they come off the soccer field and they take off their shoes and they've got a blister, and you're like, wait, you just played the whole game with a blister? That must hurt so bad. And all of a sudden your foot starts throbbing and you're like, oh my gosh, I feel so bad. Because you have this displaced, feelings and, sympathetic pain. My kid was so sick and hurt so bad that he thought he needed to leave this earth. That will devastate me for the rest of my life, because you just don't want your children to be in that kind of pain.
I just have to tell you, like, it's almost like when I hear you talking, you impress me so much, because I think about, like, you did everything you could, you've done everything you can. You wrote this you're a beautiful writer. You wrote this beautiful book. I meet people all the time that go through loss, and I really selfishly feel like it's my way of being like, oh, I want to find out how you made it through these things. So like the grief, like having that in common, the loss and grief is like a club you just never want to be in, but you're just in it. But then to write a book about, grief and how to deal with it, but you still don't know how to deal with it, even though you wrote the book and you're still in it. It's only been a few years. And I wrote this post a couple of days ago on Instagram because I was thinking about my dad, because I lost my dad when I was a little girl. And I felt like I posted this picture of us as a family, and it was when our family was really happy. And we took this picture in a rock garden, and I wrote something about the if onlys, like, because I'll forever have these like if onlys. If only this wouldn't have happened, then I would be doing like this. Or if only this wouldn't have happened, my dad maybe would have met my husband, or met my grandchildren or his grandchildren. Like all of those things that I'm sure you can understand and relate to. Can you kind of like talk about that piece of it? Because it's like you're still just a couple years out. I can't even deal with grieving my dad and my best friend and my sister. And it's been like 22 years today for Julie, or I don't even know how many years for my dad and my sister, even more than that. So tell me that piece of it.
I'm still learning.
Mm-hmm.
One thing that helped me a lot, I never did grief support groups. I think they're a great idea because it is very hard to talk about, and those settings can really, they spark conversation that's absolutely essential. And so, but I was very selfish in my grief. I it was all about me. And I just didn't think I had the capacity to listen and share. But I did meet with a woman in my community, a friend of a friend, who brought us together. I went to her house, and she had lost a son to suicide. um, over 20 years before. And he was young, he was in high school, and he killed himself in their home, and she and her daughter found him. And, you know, she's 23, 24 years removed from this. She's got grandkids and her daughter's other children. And so we have this kinship. We're kind of talking this language that I'm still learning. That was important. It felt good. But she said, the pain will lessen, but the whole will always be there. And I needed to hear that. I needed to know I was not going to hurt that bad forever. Mm-hmm. And I can say, sitting right here, right now, I don't hurt that bad. I don't hurt the way I did in the first year. Doesn't mean I don't hurt. But the whole, like that visual really makes sense. I'm not the same person. There is a but associated with everything. We're about to go on family vacation in May. It's going to be great. We're going to Italy. Yeah, but Charlie's not with us. Mm-hmm. So again, it's just, to me, it's accepting as a part of me and it's a part of my life, and not fighting it, not trying to change it. It just is. It just is. And sometimes those what ifs and what abouts and why nots, they bloom, they grow. And I think it's okay to roll around in it. Oh my gosh, you can't believe how many times I'll just be trotting around in my day, and all of a sudden this feeling or a memory will come but I give myself over to it. And doing that, and it may last 5 minutes, it may last a couple hours, but doing that allows me to sit here right now and talk in a, kind of regular conversational way. It's not because anything I've experienced or anything I feel is regular or normal or okay. It's not okay. It's not okay. But part of my way of learning to live with it is to embrace it when it comes. Let it take me wherever I'm going. Sometimes it puts me straight to bed, or straight to stare at the ceiling for hours, or I cry, or I write, or I walk. I go where it takes me. Mm. Because you can't avoid it. And the energy you put into trying to hold it together, the energy you put into resisting your anger, that is energy that you need to spend healing yourself and learning to live with this new version of yourself. Put that energy where it can help you.
I think that going with it is huge. I think that's a really big piece of it. And I think that that's so important for people to hear. If I have somebody that's listening right now and they specifically are listening to this podcast because maybe they're just in the beginning stages of losing a child to suicide, is there anything that you can say to that person?
Go easy on yourself. There's no one right way to get past this. There's no prescription. There's no formula. But try and be really present and honest with yourself about what you're experiencing. Because that will help. That will help you take those minuscule steps to figuring out how to heal and how to live this completely revised life. And cry. You were talking about crying earlier. That's probably the best advice I got. Cry. You have a lot to cry about. It's
Can
okay.
I just say one other thing? And you're probably going to say, oh God, Meghan, shut up. Or my listeners are going to say that. When you said that you're going to Italy, which is, by the way, my favorite place. I just went last year. My husband's fluent in Italian. That he'll be there with you. Because you said he won't go on the trip. He will be on that trip. He'll be on that trip.
Oh, yeah.
Just remember that when you're on the trip, because it's such a beautiful place. For the sake of time, I do want to ask you where people can find you. If you're on Instagram, where can people find you?
Sure. I am on Instagram at Blackbird Betsy 21. And I do have a website that's blackbirdbetsy.com. And my book, Blackbird, which is about losing my son to suicide and the grief journey, that's available starting April 8th. Sorry. Gosh, I should know that. Anywhere books are sold. So online, Amazon, local booksellers. And it is paperback, but it also comes in an ebook and audiobook.
Listeners, if you're listening, it's a beautifully written book. I mean, I'm sorry to say this, but Charlie is really proud of you right now. He's listening. And I know you're like, oh, I didn't want to go on a podcast. He would be so embarrassed. I'm sure he's not. I'm sure he's like, my mom's fighting for other Charlies out there, other boys, that young boys that, like you're trying to help parents and help other survivors. You helped me today. I don't think you realized how much you helped me, because this conversation was exactly what I needed today. Because they're
Isn't it
still
amazing
with us.
how that happens?
Oh yeah. I always ask this at the end. Do you have a sign that he's with you?
Oh, everything is a sign.
Oh,
everything is a sign.
But you have like a special sign. Like I have my sign is the monarch butterfly that I know Julie's with me. What's your sign? Like a specific one.
The thing that really, really catches my eye, like catches my attention, is when the light bulbs flicker. So
is that why you said in the beginning, oh, Charlie's right here, and was that a light bulb flickering?
Oh no, there's a photo of him.
Okay, I couldn't see. Okay, I was like, oh, was the light bulb? Maybe that means he likes me.
No, it was a photo of him over my shoulder. Yeah, no, I mean, never mind that I live in an old house with some pretty crappy wiring. I mean, like whenever the lights start to flicker, I stop what I'm doing and go, oh, Charlie, what's up? What are you trying to tell me? And if it like really goes crazy, or like if the light bulb pops out or whatever, and okay, all right, you're telling me to pay attention, anything I need to know? That's actually what sparks the most conversation. The other thing is, we have cottontail rabbits in our yard, and I'm a big gardener, and they destroy my garden, so I really don't like them. But now I talk to them because I think they're little Charlies. We saw a cottontail on our back porch, our back patio, right after he died. I was like, oh, he's coming to see us. And so now I call rabbits Charlies. And when they come over into my flower beds, I say, okay, little Charlie, I'm so happy to see you, but you really need to keep going. Now stay safe. Go out, get out of my yard and stay safe. So I have whole conversations with rabbits. Yeah.
That's okay, because everyone knows that listens that I have conversations with monarch butterflies on very often too. And it's okay. I believe they are there. Betsy, it was such a pleasure to have you on today. It was such an honor. Thank you so much for everything you do and, sharing your book and your story. Really quickly, for the sake of time, we talked about in the very beginning what you do, in memory of him. Can you talk a little bit about what you do?
So we have a couple of little places where they're kind of shrines, I guess, photos, and some mementos. And so I tell him good morning and good night every day. Sometimes when I'm just walking by, I'll pick up his picture and talk to it. We have candles that are lit intermittently. I think those are kind of the behind the scene things. I think the main thing for us is we keep him a part. Our family keeps him a part of our conversations. So we bring him up, we're watching a sports game and go, oh, what would Charlie think about that uniform? Right. Or we hear about something that's going on and, oh, Charlie would think that was hilarious. Or you remember the time that Charlie, he is present. He is active. He is every day part of our conversations. It's real. And that's really, that feels good. That feels really good. And we've noticed a lot of his friends do it too, which is fabulous. They text and they say, hey, I went to this place and last time I was here was with Charlie and he said the funniest thing. Like, that fills me up. That literally keeps him alive. So
he sounds like I said, he wasn't of this world. That's what I'm convinced of. And he's with you. And Charlie, thanks for having your mom on today, because it was a really big honor to meet you. Everyone, in closing, thank you for listening. If you do know somebody that struggles with suicide, or you yourself are struggling, I want you to always know, keep going. I say it every podcast, at the end of every podcast. There's a reason for it, because I struggled myself. I'm very open with it. I'm still freaking here. It's 2024. I kept going. And that's why I say this all the time. And I say this every podcast at the end. Keep going. You matter. Your story matters. Thanks, Betsy.
Thank you.
Judging Meghan with Meghan Judge.